New number 6. Consideration of a resolution to set a public hearing, and that public hearing within the resolution is set for the 17th day of April of this year at 6 p.m. here at the City Council. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
This is about the
This has to do with
West
the
2nd Street,
request, yes, request for closing a portion of that street by the Warrens.
Are we discussing this?
Well, I didn't hear a second. Do you want to get into the discussion?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second to that motion.
And then I'd like
Yes,
to
sir.
ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Is this not the street that we talked about a year ago, possibly opening up?
yes, sir. Talked about opening this from Walmart to Phoenix, right?
There was discussion on that. You're correct.
It currently runs from Seattle to Phoenix.
Right. So really, we'd be opening it from Seattle to the parking lot then?
Correct.
Okay.
The public hearing might bring out some insight in regard to that.
You know, this has still got to go before the planning commission for approval.
That's correct.
And I personally don't see a reason to go forward with this ordinance, not knowing if the planning commission is going to support or defeat this.
Well, it's a resolution just to set a hearing
For next month.
I
for
realize
next month,
that,
and
but
that'll
if
need to be
the
done.
planning commission doesn't go forward with their proposal, then
See, that has to be done before it can go to the commission, as I understand it.
Can I jump in?
Yes, sir.
Because all you're doing tonight is setting a date for a public hearing, all of this discussion should take place at the public hearing. You'll have the planning commission's recommendation. I just think it'll be an artificial thing to not, if you turn it down now, you're basically saying we'll turn it down without a public hearing.
That's
So
correct.
just, you'll be subverting your own process. So please
I
just set
disagree
the
with
hearing.
Mr.
I disagree
Harris.
with that,
If
Mr. Harris.
the-
What we'll
if
be
the-
doing
If it
is
hasn't gone through the planning commission yet, then we don't know that it's going to pass, then the public hearing would be useless.
The planning commission only makes a recommendation, and their participation in this is not even required by the state of Arkansas. That's the Russellville ordinance from several years back.
Whatever we do here tonight, Mr. Harrison, will be the administration of the legislative process. And that's all.
My point is, because you're only setting a date for a hearing, if you...
Motion to call the question.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to close the discussion on this. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Let's get a roll call on that, please.
Exactly what are we voting on here?
We're voting to close the discussion regarding this request to move forward with setting a public hearing.
Mr. Martin Owen,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
No.
Mr. Seth Irwin,
No.
Mr. Tripp,
No.
Ms. Freddie Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Stuber.
No.
4-4.
It takes 2/3.
Motion
Takes-
fails.
Motion fails, takes 2/3.
Mayor, what happens if we don't pass this? What happens if we don't set this tonight?
Say that again, if we
What
don't
happens
set
if we
what?
do not set this public hearing tonight?
Well, we just denied a request by a citizen who has asked to have this request that they've made considered, and basically have short-circuited their options to do what they're asking. it's whatever y'all want to do, but if there is some other consideration, that's up to y'all. It has to go before the planning
Why
commission.
don't we wait for that?
But what happens if the planning commission approves it?
We just, the
It
hearing.
comes back.
Then it would come back here, yes. It would have a public hearing, and then it would come back here.
Would we not set the public hearing if the planning commission passes it? I mean, what's the, Mr. Smith, what's the due process here?
Well, you're setting it in anticipation for a recommendation that's going to occur next Monday, and it's to also keep so that you don't wait and see and at least a month in between finding out in April and setting the next available public hearing in May. It's just simply to not stretch out this process.
I don't remember us doing this way in the past, is my
Oh,
point.
yeah.
We have done, yes.
Setting
A
the
number
public
of
hearing
times.
before the planning commission takes
Yeah,
action.
that's,
All you're doing is setting the hearing. You're not making any decision on it, and it has been done this way before.
And if the planning commission denies it, what happens then?
Nothing.
they can appeal to us, as we have had in other things.
So then at next month's meeting, per se, we would have a public hearing and an appeal, both. The public hearing would happen no matter if the planning commission approves it or denies it, assuming that the requester appeals the denial.
It wouldn't be an appeal. The planning commission makes a recommendation, and it comes to you folks either way. I think I'm correct on that, Mr. Smith.
It's a recommendation, so they can it's going to come to you as the final decision, like zoning.
If I may, I believe, Mr. Harris, last week, wasn't that the way the discussion was? They just asked to do it this way so that we eliminated that 30 days or whatever lag
Right.
time. I think they had even indicated that if the planning commission votes not to move forward with it, that they would probably withdraw their request for this public hearing?
I
Is that
think they would
correct?
still want to come because the planning commission is simply a recommendation, has no legal binding at all on it. So stop me if you don't want to hear it again, but if you throw this out tonight, basically what happens is it goes to planning commission, and you just essentially added 30 more days to their timetable without accomplishing anything that I can see. All you're doing is saying, we will review this and have a public hearing on it next month, and we'll know exactly what the planning commission has said by that time.
And that way you'll find out if there are any objections or not of
Exactly.
the public or whatever.
And I know there are going to be some, and I think that may be what's driving some of the discussion tonight. 'Cause I know some of you have strong feelings about this, but all we're doing tonight is asking to set the public hearing. I just think you'll be giving them a 30-day delay for no good reason if you don't do it tonight.
Of course, if I may, it sounds a little counterproductive to me to be setting a public hearing and talking about closing a portion of a street that this same group talked about opening up less than a year ago.
Well, is there a plan right now that's sitting out there, Mr. Stuber?
No, there is no plan.
Okay, so,
But there's, like the Glenwood Railroad crossing got closed years ago, I mean, it would be nice if that was open now, wouldn't
we certainly would.
it? I mean, that's just like this. I mean, if you're gonna run around town and close every street, that there's no plan to open up,
Well, Mr. Stuber, if I could jump in, if you basically decide before the public hearing, then you've thrown your own process out. I'll admit, I told the applicant from the start, this is going to be a high hill to climb for you. But we still have a process, and that includes a public hearing. All we're doing tonight is saying, can we have a public hearing, as the state code says, next month on this, after the planning commission will have made their recommendation and pass it on to you.
I agree with Mr. Harris. We need to follow a process. Our process is goes to the planning commission, then they make a recommendation to the council, and then we'll consider any public hearing or any issues after that.
I agree with Mr. Harris.
So what's the pleasure, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. We had a motion and a second. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Motion was to go ahead with the public hearing and set the public hearing. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
I heard one nay. Is that correct? That's correct. All right. Motion carries.